Hello and welcome back to One-on-One Shadowboxing. Have your say. In the last part of our episode, we will talk with Greg Kenny, who is from RAM, the Rural Action Movement, which is established in roughly 1991. Greg, what is your group is doing where you are the president?
Basically, Rural Action Movement focuses very much on keeping farmers on their land, particularly West Australian farmers.
Everyone is want to purchase lands in Western Australia, rural lands and farms. And our government is selling out with a blessing. So what's the view?
Rural Action Movement isn't happy with that approach, let me tell you. We believe that selling off your primary industry assets, be it mining, which they've pretty much done, there's not too much of our mining.
It's a done deal.
Yeah, and now with the only one of the few bastions of wealth that we have left that's Australian, in terms of the primary industry, they are now wanting to sell off the farm, so to speak.
So why the government want to sell out the food bowl?
They have this thing called a free market agenda, and it appears with the free market agenda that it doesn't matter who owns the asset, it's who gets all the jobs, who does the cash flow side of running the business. So owning the land, doesn't matter whether it's Australians, West Australians,
or Chinese.
Doesn't matter. They own the land, but it's the cash flow that you generate from that land under free market, that's the most important thing. You know, we've all listened to the news. We've just lost our car industry. It's
and
all
half
foreign.
of the aluminium industry.
Yes.
And the whole manufacturing industry is almost not exist in Australia.
So free market works beautifully until...
For whom?
Well, until such time as those industries get into trouble when they say to the Australian government, oh, we need some help. And the Australian government says, well, no, we can't help you. You are owned by a multinational company. Why would we help you? Our taxpayers would get very upset, and they would, and they do. So then the company says, well, we'll take our business back to where we have come from, back to America, back to Japan.
But you know, any government...
And so we lose the business and the jobs.
And everything.
And it's backfiring. So Rural Action Movement, you know, we're just about keeping Australian and Western Australian farmers on their land. And it's a big battle against the banks. And make no mistake, it is a big fight. However, we are making a lot of headway. We have farmers come to us and they think that the world is coming to an end. And for them, it is. So we tend to...
What's the relationship between banks and farming?
Look, it's been pretty good. I mean, they're a different animal, but they've certainly changed. There's a focus now on their corporate profile, which is to do with the stock market. They seem to have more interest in their bottom line, to make the big profits, to impress everybody on the stock market. It's a narcissistic thing, really, and that's what banks are. That's part of what they are. But look, there's a lot of good relationships between the banking industry and the farming industry. You know, we need to get that into perspective.
So what is the problem then?
Well, yes, look, when a farmer's equity goes below a certain point, the bank deems them a risk as a client. So, you know, different things happen. And the things that have impacted on farmers' equity have been a run of dry seasons, frost, low commodity prices thrown into the mix, and poor harvest. So there's been a lot of factors come into play, and suddenly farmers have had to borrow more from the bank, which they've obliged, and they've eroded their equity. So a commercial bank then has to deal with the problem. And of course, that's within their rights. However, Rural Action Movement believes there are other ways of dealing with the problem other than issuing a default notice and then setting in motion a whole raft of procedures that follow the default notice, which often and ultimately end in eviction.
So how can, you know, the Rural Action Movement or anyone else balance this situation?
Yeah. Look, at the end of the day, it will have to be a political solution. There will need to be an inquiry into the actions of the bank, and I'm sitting here and we've spoken about the actions of the ANZ Bank. That needs to be told for what it is. It's a terrible story, and half the farmers that have come to the rural action movement are disaffected ANZ clients. And there is a story behind that. The class action will address that story and what's gone on there, but it's a terrible story. So that's one action we can take. The other is individual actions. Rural Action Movement has a lot of strategies in dealing with the foreclosure process, but at the end of the day, Rural Action Movement wants two things. It wants the politicians, be it federal or state, to have an inquiry into the banking system in rural Australia and their behaviour and lack of. And the other thing that Rural Action wants is a return to a sovereign bank, a government bank. And when I started farming back in the 80s roughly, we had a number of government banks, and I could rattle off who they were. They were privatised and sold off in the early 90s under the Hawke-Keating government. And that then has, in my opinion...
changed the landscape.
It has, yes it has. And it was put in place, all those instruments, those government banking instrumentalities were put in place by our forefathers for good reason. And in the brave new world of the free market agenda, the Hawke-Keating government, it doesn't matter which government it is, it can be Liberal, Labor, it doesn't matter. They decided to get rid of that because it didn't fit the model, and they got rid of probably what used to save rural Australia when we did get into strife back prior to the
private banks.
To the early 90s, yes.
So the future is?
A primary industry bank is really what we want, state and federal levels. It's in our constitution. You don't have to pass any acts in Parliament. They're there. All the government has to do is set it up. That's number one. Number two, there needs to be a moratorium on foreclosures here and now. That has got to stop. There are not enough people in the bush now, as it stands, to be throwing more of us off our land. And believe me, there is a lot of pain out there. A lot of farmers don't come forward with their problems, but it's certainly there.
Thank you for your visit, Greg, and we wish your action group the best for the fight with the banks. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you, Tibor, and thank you for the opportunity.
Please come back next week, same time, same channel, one-on-one shadow boxing. Have your say.